So, what do you see on the screen in your mind when you think about the foyer of your funeral home? What do you see when on the screen of your mind when you think about your main visitation room? What do you see when you think about your chapel on the screen in your mind? Well, I guarantee you that if you thought about those three things, you saw your foyer, you saw your visitation room, and you saw the chapel on the screen in your mind. Why? Why? The answer is, according to Dr. William Glasser, who was a late American psychiatrist, he said, we think in pictures. We think in pictures and we speak in words. So if you downloaded the helpful keyword document, I want you to put in the first line, we think in pictures. And here's the value of having this document to kind of keep track of what we're talking about today. My experience has been that when we finish today's webinar, you'll have probably forgotten 85 to 90% of what we talked about within a few days. But if you have this card and you fill it out, I promise you that a month from now, a year from now, when you refer to it, you'll remember a lot of the key points of what we talked about today. So if we think in pictures, what pictures do consumers see when they think about your funeral home? What pictures do they see? Do they see a picture of something that looks like this? A billboard that says 10 ridiculous reasons to monkey around? Or do they see a picture that looks like this? A funeral professional who can serve a family in need? Do they see, and by the way, this is a real post, the sponsor's name's hidden, but enjoy chocolate day. Is this the picture that people see when they think about your funeral home? Or do they see a picture of a funeral professional in a chapel where a life can be celebrated? How about a post featuring a price or a billboard that features a price or somebody that can pre-plan a funeral? Well, a lot of times our experience has been a lot of folks, they don't even have a picture of a funeral home at all. And that would be definitely a mistake. So today's webinar is all about busting the myths of local advertising for funeral homes and how to invest your advertising dollars wisely. And I'm excited about presenting this to you today. It's all based on my book, which is How Facebook Works for Funeral Homes. And I give this book away when I speak. And I also have it, of course, at my booth. And when people ask for it, I send it to them. My objective for you today, what I'm going for you, is to help you understand how to effectively advertise your funeral home. Effectively advertise your funeral home so that you can actually believe that your funeral home can effectively advertise. That's my goal for you. That's my Christmas wish for you today. So, and we're going to be talking about mass media. And as Jen told you, I spent 25 years in broadcasting. We actually write radio ads for customers. We write TV ads for customers. We have also, of course, we're experts in Facebook, and that's our primary business. But we're going to talk about both today. So this is kind of neat. We're also going to give you some advice on what media make sense from a money standpoint and which ones are you throwing money away at. And of course, I want you to use the worksheet that you've gotten today. Maybe you have a card that looks like this or the worksheet that I just showed. So what is a myth? What's a myth? Well, the answer is a myth is a commonly believed but false idea. And, you know, having worked in broadcasting for 25 years and called on a lot of funeral homes, I've heard a lot of myths, both in broadcasting and then working in social media like I do today. Here's myth number one. Advertising doesn't work for me. And what I always hear when I hear this, I always hear the next sentence, which is word of mouth is my best form of advertising. Well, of course it is. Of course it is. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you the 4 pillars of effective local advertising. This is a secret that I learned about 3 years before I left broadcasting, and I was working in radio. And when I started to sell advertising based on these 4 pillars, I was getting results on radio from my clients. And I'm going to tell you, if you can get results on radio, you can get results on anything. So these are the 4 pillars of effective local advertising: reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. And we're going to go through that today in more detail. But you know, if Coca-Cola can advertise, and they've proven that advertising works, and Geico has definitely proved that advertising works, then it certainly can work for you. Myth number 2, I don't want to appear opportunistic and sound like a vulture. Well, here's my thought about that. You see advertising for insurance providers. I love this one: leave love, not stress. So here's my question: who's leaving? All right. Or this one here: life insurance, a small price to pay to protect your loved ones. Protect them from what? These are major advertisers, and they're talking about the possibility of death, and so are these people. So if they can advertise it, why, certainly a funeral home can too. Myth number 3, everybody knows who we are. Everybody knows we're here. Well, I can tell you, having been in broadcasting and met with hundreds of retailers, the answer to that is, oh, no, they don't. And I saw this piece. I thought this was interesting. This was something that came out from one of the major moving companies, and says Americans live, how many years ago do Americans live close to home? And you can see about 18% say they've lived near and home for 11 to 20 years. But in the bottom right, only 12% say they've lived in their hometown for 31 to 35 years. So basically what that means is people move. And also when people move, people forget. And there's no doubt, when I work in advertising and talk to people about advertising and how advertising works, people do forget, which is why it's always important to persuade, inform, and remind when it comes to buying advertising. Myth number 4, I don't advertise because I don't know what to say. Well, today I'm going to go through some topics that you can use to make it easier for you to advertise your business. And these topics are all referenced in my book, How Facebook Works for Funeral Homes. And then number 5, funeral home advertising is negative and depressing. Well, we write for a number of funeral homes nationally. And what I can tell you is, when we read comments from Facebook users, it is anything but. This is a perfect example. This is Green Hills Funeral Home in Kentucky. And this was one of the first posts that we published for this firm. And you can see right here, 363 people liked it or loved it. And what were they saying about this family? Absolutely the best. Betty says, thanks for helping my family more than one time. Amy said, the best. I'll never forget how well they cared for my dad. And Regina said, cannot say enough wonderful things about this couple. 88 people had to say something about this couple. What they were saying was not negative. It was all positive. So I'm going to show you how advertising works. This is a secret. I have a degree in television and radio at Syracuse. I'm an expert, but I had to learn this from a broadcaster in North Carolina who was incredibly successful. And so I'm going to teach this to you as well. And so these are the 4 pillars of effective local advertising. And they are reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. Copy, of course, being the words that you use. And I want you to write that down. Write that down. The 4 pillars of effective local advertising are reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. So we've talked a little bit about how advertising works. Now, so let's get into this conversation. What do you say? What do you say in an ad? And so, again, as I mentioned to you, our book, How Facebook Works for Funeral Homes, has a number of topics detailed in the back of the book. And I can tell you that when we first started our business, I had a hard time trying to write ads because when you think about it, if you're going to write a 60-second ad or a 30-second ad for a funeral home, well, what do you say? And you get into this concept where you got to say a lot of different things, how long we've been here, our approach to and it just becomes too complicated. But what we figured out is if we knew the topic of what we are talking about, then it was far easier to write an ad. So think about it. Writing an ad for a funeral home might be difficult, but how about this? Writing an ad for somebody that you know, like a funeral director, that might be easy. So on your keyword document, write that in. Knowing the topic makes it easier to write advertising copy. It's like this. It's hard to write an ad for a funeral home, but it should be a lot easier to write an ad about branding a funeral director. Why? Well, I mean, who knows more about funeral directors than funeral directors? So this is an example of a funeral director branding ad. And of course, these are Facebook ads, but here's an example of a script that could be used in radio or television. In the wake of a loss, you may need a shoulder to lean on. Ridge Funeral Home and Cremation Service and dedicated directors like Carson Wright are committed to providing guidance, comfort, and support whenever it's needed. It's what we do for the families in our care. That's what funeral directors do. That's exactly what they do. Branding funeral assistants is the same idea, and it's always amazing to me who's the most popular assistants in your firm. It could be a member of the community, a retired member of the community that now works for you part-time, even office administrators, or a therapy dog. Very popular. Here's an ad. We are committed to service, day or night, weekends or holidays. Staff members like funeral assistant Francis Richardson are here to support you, and when called, compassionately bring your loved one into our care. Smith Funeral Home of Florence, serving the Florence area since 1950. Simple idea. Pre-planning, we have a number of people that buy pre-planning advertising, and that's why they're advertising. They're wanting to grow their book of business. Life insurance is a safety net for your loved ones. Pre-planning your funeral is too. Call Lau Funeral Home and pre-plan with funeral director Kelly Smith, or click the Learn More button. Simple idea. Simple idea. The benefits of being family owned. This is another topic that's very easy to write for. Cremation services. Cremation options are all about the importance of talking to a funeral director so that consumers can discover what options they should consider to use. One topic that we've decided to use a lot more lately is called traditional cremations. And essentially with traditional cremations, the concept is very simple. We talk about that the funeral service, the sights and sounds are pretty much the same. The only difference is there's no graveside service. And of course, if you're in the, if you do have an on-site crematory, then we use that positioning statement, your loved one never leaves our care. And we have some clients that like to do on-site crematory, and then we have some that do pets. Pets are important for businesses, especially when they're trying to grow their customer base. Your facility, maybe people seen the outside, they've never seen the inside. So again, if you think in pictures, it's important to show the pictures of the inside of your funeral home. Here's Memorial Funeral Home in San Juan, Texas. Now, this is an important piece as we talk about how advertising works. So we've told you how it works, but now we want to help you understand why in the heck would anybody want to read one of your ads or see one of your ads or basically listen to one of your ads and pay attention. And this is going to be the consumer's journey to purchasing funeral services. This is actually going to be our presentation for 2024, the consumer's journey to purchasing funeral services. And this, funeral services advertising is like a retail store. You're a retail business because it's a business to consumer. And so there are 4 buckets that a consumer might go through. as they're purchasing anything. And so it is awareness, interest, desire, and action. So obviously, awareness, interest, and desire and action is going to be different based on the product sold. But for a funeral, it's important to know how a consumer would go through the funnel as they consider purchasing services from you. So this is an important idea to consider. And I've asked this a number of times, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I was in Saratoga, New York, doing a presentation, and I asked the group, I said, has anybody here bought a car within the last year or so that they dreamed about owning and they just absolutely had to have? And so somebody in the room raised their hand, and I asked what kind of car they were dreaming about, and they said they wanted a red Mercedes. And so they were thinking about a red Mercedes all the time. And here's the thing about that is when you decide you want to buy a car, did you ever notice that your dream car was suddenly everywhere? You see it everywhere. Why? Why is that? And the answer is the power of your subconscious mind. And think about it like this. Your subconscious mind is dedicated to doing two things for you. The first thing is keeping you alive, which I'm thankful for that. But the other thing is your subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into your life what you think about most of the time. Let me repeat that again. Your subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into your life what you think about most of the time. So write that down. Your subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into your life what you're thinking about most of the time. So for that person in Saratoga thinking about that red Mercedes, well, their subconscious mind was showing as many of those as it could to get that consumer closer to buying it. And if you think about the subconscious mind, and I could talk about the power of the subconscious mind for hours. Forbes magazine describes the power of a subconscious mind. This would be their metaphor. If a power of a subconscious mind was a Ferrari, then the conscious brain, what we're using today for today's presentation, would have the power of a skateboard. So think about that in terms of what's more powerful, the subconscious brain or the conscious brain? And the answer, of course, is your subconscious brain. Psychology Today said, imagine for a moment that your subconscious mind is like a giant filing cabinet. Your conscious brain forgets everything. Your subconscious brain forgets nothing. Repeatedly being exposed to radio ads, TV ads, billboards, or Facebook ads with key messaging could be considered an unconscious imbibing of affirmations, which, if accepted by the subconscious mind, could influence decisions, positive or negative, towards the advertised product or service. And this is important to understand as you think about how a consumer consumes advertising. I mean, think about this. A consumer is going to see 2 or 3 or 4 or 5,000 advertising messages a day. Why in the heck would they pay attention to yours? So if the consumer is in the awareness phase, all that means is that they're aware a funeral home is advertising, but that's pretty much going to be about it. They're not going to consciously remember that. They're not going to consciously attempt to store it. It's just something that they may have seen or heard. They're aware of it, and that's probably about it. And so the question again is, will a consumer consciously read or remember your ads? And the answer is typically no. But the whole purpose of advertising consistently, as we talked about, the 4 pillars to buying effective local advertising, is to establish an equity position in the mind of a consumer. Establish an equity position in the mind of the consumer. What would change a consumer going from an awareness phase to an interest phase when it comes to funeral services? And the answer is probably something that's happened to somebody else. Maybe a parent of a friend passed away. Maybe they attended a funeral. Something that they got touched by the funeral industry or by somebody in funeral one way, shape, or form, but it didn't affect them. It's when they get into the desire phase, that's all of a sudden when they're going to start paying attention to funeral messaging. So, what would be an example of somebody who starts to think about funeral services day or night, just like they may have thought about that red Mercedes? Well, it could have been that somebody came to them and said, "You have 6 months to live." It could have been somebody came to them and said, "Your mother has 6 months to live." And anybody that hears that about themselves or for a loved one, now when they go to bed at night, they're going to be thinking about what's going to happen next. When they wake up, they're going to be thinking about the same thing. It will be what they think about most of the time. And because your subconscious brain is dedicated to bringing into your life what you think about most of the time, just like that red Mercedes, same thought process. Consumers now are going to be thinking about the funeral and the funeral process. And the question is, what pictures do they see of your business, of your staff, of your funeral home? Of course, when a consumer moves into the action phase, that's when you see a lot of people focus on buying Google AdWords. They're trying to capture those consumers searching on the internet for the name of a firm. And so when somebody is on Google and they're searching for the name of a funeral home, we want them to be searching on our client's name. That's the reason we want them to use Google. So when they take action, they've consumed a lot of advertising. When they're in the desire phase, that's when they start reading copy. That's when they start listening to copy. That's when they start being aware or exposed because their subconscious brain is bringing into their life what they think about most of the time. So if your advertising is reaching 10 to 25,000 consumers 4 to 6 times a month, what will they do when it's time to take action? Go to Google and search on a funeral home or search for your funeral home. It's the businesses that consistently advertise where the Google search is being used like the white pages, not the yellow pages. So let's talk about Facebook for a minute because I know a little bit about Facebook. And I want to help you understand what Facebook is. And so in the same way as we're talking about media, we're talking about effective local advertising. This is the kind of advertising that can expand your visibility in your community, can expand the reputation of your brand, and can expand your business. So write this down. Facebook reaches 70% of your local market, 70%. Facebook is the biggest local medium in every market in America. So write that down. There's no radio station, TV station, newspaper, nothing in your market that's bigger and reaches more consumers as one idea of media than Facebook. So what is it? What is Facebook? Everyone will say, well, Facebook is social media. Well, that's kind of confusing because it's hard to define what social media is. But if we talk about it from an advertising perspective, that's where it becomes a little bit more interesting. I use this graph to show you the history of the newspaper industry. And as a broadcaster, we competed against the newspaper in the 80s and 90s and 2000. And I'm telling you, when everybody got the newspaper, they were hard to beat. And so what this graph will show you is in the year 2000, the newspaper industry sold $67 billion in advertising. It was the biggest year they've ever had. But you can see about 5 or 6 years out, all of a sudden, it started to fall apart. Why was the newspaper so big? Well, everybody got the newspaper. Do you remember getting your picture in the paper? I know I do. That's me on the left side, the guy with the glasses. And that picture is 56 years old. I mean, that was an important picture to me because when my picture was in the paper, everybody saw it. Everybody at my school saw it. Everybody I played basketball with saw it. Everybody my parents knew, they saw it. Why? Why did everybody see it? The answer was the paper was it. Remember how big it was, how tall it was, and how thick it was? It's why we recycle. It's why we recycle. But one of the most well-read pages in the newspaper was the obituary column. And it was tough for the newspaper because it's not exactly the page you can sell recliners on. So they talked about the sports section being the best, or the business section, or the lifestyle section being important. People read obituaries every day, and this page was heavily read. Why? Why? Well, the answer is obituaries are powerful local news. They were then, and they are now. The other thing about the obituary column that's vitally important to remember is this, is the obituary column was a daily market survey. It showed consumers where the business was going, who was popular, who was trusted more, who was trusted less. Well, that visual for the funeral homes that did real well, that was daily advertising, and it was very effective. But here's the problem with that. The newspaper is gone. The obituary column is gone. And so what happened? What happened? Well, there's two things in history that are worth mentioning. In 2006, Facebook launched. And in 2007, the Time Magazine Invention of the Year was the iPhone. So if you look at the graph, you could see around 2006, 2007, all of a sudden, newspaper advertising began to plummet. And that's because they began to lose readers like crazy. So where did they go? They went to Facebook. And so the best metaphor that I can give you, if you read my book, is Facebook is what the newspaper used to be, or we can say it in just two words. Facebook is the newspaper. That's the best and easiest way to define what Facebook is. So write that down. Facebook is the newspaper. Well, our presentation for Facebook, we always talk about how to be known, trusted, and celebrated on Facebook. And doing all four pillars in how advertising works is vitally important. But I can tell you, when I first began in this business, I really didn't know what to do. And Paula Lau and I, we spent a lot of time talking about what we should post on our Facebook page. And we started to talk about, what consumers were interested in. But when I asked Jim Lau, I asked Jim, I said, what was it that made his firm unique? Without any hesitation, he said it was his people. His people made his firm unique. And so we started taking pictures of people standing in foyers, people standing next to lecterns, people standing in visitation rooms, people in chapels. And what we saw on Facebook, where we were concerned about, where everything we're writing about is about death and the funeral process. What Paul and I saw was, it was almost like it was our own focus group. People loved what we were doing. But we went down this path. We talked about this thing called deathless topics. And, if we were, and these are just a few older examples, but this was October 24th, National Bologna Day. Can you see a post on Facebook for National Bologna Day? And I'm going to tell you, I've seen a number of posts for funeral homes like National Chocolate Day, and they don't make sense. National Greasy Foods Day, National Care About You Day. We don't care at all except for today. Today we care about you. But what we figured out was posting and boosting on Facebook for about a month was our organic market study. We figured something out. And what we figured out is Facebook users liked what we posted. They loved what we posted, and they were making comments. So what did they say? They were praising individual staff members, expressing gratitude for services provided months ago, years ago, and they were just all gone thankful that they were there. And so we figured out Facebook users loved their funeral homes, and so use pictures of faces on Facebook. How hard is that? It's not that hard. Use pictures of faces on Facebook. And so the last piece on Facebook I'm going to talk about is boosting posts. And I call this the quiet storm. You know, if you're buying TV ads or billboards, or in the old days when you bought a lot of newspaper ads, your competitors could see what you do. But with Facebook advertising, if you're buying Facebook advertising, your competition may perceptually have an idea of what you're doing. They don't know you're reaching tens of thousands of consumers every month. And so I call this the quiet storm. This is your secret tool to get advertising results for your business. And write that down. You can create a storm, quiet storm, when you boost your posts on Facebook. Boost your posts. So how do we do it? How do we do it at Post and Boost? This is my. And what's always interesting to me is when we run an ad for pre-planning and somebody walks in and pre-plans a funeral, it's amazing how that works. This is our client in Cullman, Alabama. And Ann describes a situation where somebody just came into their business, sat down with Ann, pre-planned a funeral, and he didn't know her and she didn't know him. And so when Ann asked him why he came to Cullman Heritage, his comment was simply said, "I see your face on Facebook all the time."